Thanks everyone for joining us today to talk about fully open access agreements, which are also sometimes referred to as peer published agreements. I'm Jennifer Gibson. I'm Executive Director at Dryad and the Chair of OASPA. I'm particularly interested in today's discussion because before joining Dryad just a couple of months ago, I was working with eLife, an open access journal in biology and medicine, where we often asked ourselves if we shouldn't be thinking about agreements with institutions. And my feeling was always that we were just too small. At the same time, I do agree that it is important that native open access publications be considered in conversations around investment in open access. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. So I bet we've got a reference to the participant guidelines as well. Just want to remind everyone that OASPA events are guided by our code of conduct. So we do want to maintain a certain tone of inclusion for all of our events. Fully open access agreements entail institutions making essential agreements to support open access publishing with fully open access publishers who have no content to transition to open access. This webinar is organized by our colleagues on the OASPA interest group for fully open access journal organizations, who by fully OA mean such publishers who publish 100% of their journal content open access and are not in a mixed model or any type of transition to open access. I'm going to briefly introduce each of our presenters in just a moment, and then each will speak for about 10 or 12 moments, and then we'll open up to discussion, and would love to hear from you and love to hear your thoughts around today's discussion. And before I do that, a couple of comments on our registration. As of yesterday, we had about 500 individuals registered to attend, so that's great. Thank you for coming. Registrants for OASPA events are from all continents, and today from about 58 countries. We have a strong representation from the US and the UK, but thanks to Copyright Clearance Center for operating our webinars, we're able to offer them for free and thus include many more people from around the world. Okay, I think I've covered everything. So now over to today's panelists. So we're going to hear from Wolfgang Benedikt Schmal, first of all, who is a doctoral researcher at Düsseldorf Institute for Competition Economics at Heinrich-Heine-University. His research interests lie in applied microeconomics and competition economics, and he recently published with colleagues economic research on the German Publish and Read agreement called Deal between Springer Nature, Wiley, and all German research institutions. Benedikt will be followed by Wilhelm Widmark, who is the library director of Stockholm University and vice chairman of the Swedish Bibsam Consortium, as well as many other pan-European affiliations. And Sharla Lair will close out. Sharla is a senior strategist of open access and scholarly communication initiatives at Lyrasis, which is a nonprofit membership organization that serves libraries, museums, and archives out of the East Coast US. So with all that said, I will hand over to Benedikt, please.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. So thanks again for inviting me here to speak in front of you and in front of so many experts on academic publishing. I'm going to present work called The Impact of the German Deal on Competition in the Academic Publishing Market, which is joint work with Justus Haukapp, who's also an economics professor here in Düsseldorf at DICE, and Iman Moshka, who's a researcher at the Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium. So first of all, let's talk a bit about the motivation. All of you have seen that academic journal subscription have faced tremendous price increases, which are mainly driven by commercial publishers. We see a high market concentration in this market and a quite interesting market organizations. So the 5 largest publishers represent the lion's share of publications in nearly any academic discipline. And we have this small group of big leaders and the long tail of many small specialized publishers. Contrary to the high prices for academic journals, we see that researchers contribute their work mostly for free. So of course they write their papers for free, but also the referee activity is done usually for free or just with a really small reimbursement, which is not really some kind of wage or so. Third, the library budgets are obviously constrained, as all of you know, and often taxpayer funded, which makes it maybe additionally interesting where the money goes and how much it's paid. And the German deal contract, I'm going to explain a bit further, has goals which directly address this cost issue. So there are basically three main goals, which I've taken from the project's website. This is immediate open access publication of all new research articles by authors from German institutions, a permanent full text access to the publisher's complete journal portfolio, and fair and reasonable pricing. So to give you an intuition on the German deal, we have on the buyer side more than 700 scientific research institutions in Germany, which are basically all institutions that do some independent research. So all German universities, all universities of applied sciences, and all the research institutions like the Max Planck Society and the Max Planck Institutes, Fraunhofer Institutes, Leibniz, Helmholtz, etc. So basically every institution here in this country. On the seller side, for the German deal contract, we have had Springer Nature, John Wiley & Sons, and initially Elsevier. We have quite a long negotiation period of this contract. So we've had a kickoff meeting in spring 2016, and the first contract became active with John Wiley & Sons in January 2019, and the contract with Springer Nature came active in January 2020. And Elsevier, that's why they are in brackets, they've left the negotiations, like bargaining process failed, and as a consequence, many subscriptions have been cancelled from German institutions. And to give you an intuition how this looks like nowadays as a researcher in Germany, for Elsevier research, if you want to access an article, you get directly this big blue bar, which highlights Heinrich-Heine-University does not subscribe to this content. So there is directly below this get access button where you can pay for an article, but you cannot access them anymore from Germany without extra costs, or for most of the institutions without extra costs. To give you a brief overview over the core deal conditions, which are of course not complete, but first of all, this contract separates journals into three types: hybrid journals, full open access journals, and read-only journals. The hybrid journals are maybe the most interesting journals. These are those journals which are subscription-based, but if you're part of the deal or sometimes some other contract, you can publish within the subscription-based system as an eligible researcher your paper open access, which makes it hybrid. Sometimes there's also the opportunity to make it open access regardless of any contract and to pay for it. But here we have the contract with the deal that for 2,750 euros published in the read fee, this article is made open access, or is published open access in an eligible hybrid journal. For full open access, there is no fixed price, but a 20% discount on the list price. And in terms of journals covered, we have for Springer Nature 1,900 hybrid journals and 440 full open access journals. And for John Wiley & Sons, we have 2,400 and something hybrid journals and 110 full open access journals. So the cost for the hybrid journals are paid in advance by a clearing system. And in the second step, these costs are covered by the research institutions directly. So there's no direct cost or effort for the researchers publishing in a hybrid journal. Different to maybe now without a contract, a researcher has to organize 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 bucks to get this publication done, maybe ask at the university library or at institutional funds, wherever. But now it's that the researcher publishes it and it's covered like in the background, and the submitting author has nothing to do with it anymore. And this makes these hybrid journals particularly attractive. So our research question related to this is now whether deal journals in general mostly maybe the hybrid journals, get more attractive for researchers at German institutions. And we want to ask whether there is a change in the probability that a paper gets published in a DL journal. And why is this particularly relevant from an economic perspective? So academic journals are two-sided markets, meaning platforms, and a bit similar to some extent, of course, this is far, maybe a bit offshoot, but to things like Facebook or so, because we have two sides that are mutually reinforcing. And more readers of a journal attract more submissions, and more submissions usually should lead to better submissions, which again attract more readers, because the readers know these journals have really important and impactful submissions. And every two-sided market, every platform has the risk of becoming a monopoly or some monopolizing development tendency. And this is what we want to analyze. So what we do in our paper is we get 1,005 journals in the field of chemistry, where we are confident that we cover more or less the whole field, which encompasses 1.4 million publications for the years 2016 up to 2020. We use chemistry because it is comparatively short turnaround times, other than maybe economics, for example, where it's usual to have 12 to 24 months, or even longer, 36 months or so, which is not unusual. And in general, restricting it to research articles and getting out some outliers, we have 1 million observations. As an empirical method, you use an heteroscedastic probit model to estimate the probabilities and do some economic regressions. And the causal identification is done by a difference in difference setup, similar to a natural experiment. So we compare publications pre and post the introduction of the deal contracts and compare it with between Germany and other countries besides Germany. We include country fixed effects, which means that we control for country effects. That means some countries are more likely to submit in some specific journals due to historical reasons or institutional reasons. And we also control for journal quality via the H index of a journal and the SkyMargo journal rank, which are both lead to the same results, basically. And this is the main result. So we have here three dots, 3-point estimates, and all around 3.5, 3.6, 3.7%. And this is the marginal effect on the probability of a paper from Germany being published in a deal journal. What does this mean? It's 3.6% more likely that a journal, that a paper appears in a deal journal than before. So this is the treatment effect. The deal causes a 3.6% higher likelihood that a paper is published in such a journal. The three phases are basically related to the implementation of the contract. So phase 1 is the Wiley contract. Phase 2 is the first step of the Springer contract in January 2020. And the third phase is the second part of the Springer contract with the full open access journals. They're pretty similar, but this is likely to be due to the fact that they're really close together. So in publication behavior, there's not so much difference due to the turnaround times. And as a second interesting finding, we also disentangled this effect, this baseline 3.6% effect, by journal quality. So what you now see on the x-axis is the journals sorted by quality, where 1 is the first quartile with the lowest quality, and in terms of H index, as I said, SkyMargo journal rank leads to the same result, and 4 is the highest value. And what we see is that for the highest ranked journals, there's no effect for publication, and for the lowest journals, there's no effect, significantly different from 0 compared to without the deal. But the highest effects are actually in the mid-range of journals. And this is quite reasonable, because open access makes papers more attractive, because makes journals more attractive, because the papers reach a wider audience. But we see that for low-ranked journals, those are not so much read at all, and the high-ranked journals are usually subscribed to by any university library as well. So they are, so to say, open access because every researcher can access this. So these figures, the inverse U-shape is quite likely. And now to wrap up, I think the competition implications is We have, of course, early evidence. This is a big caveat, and there's a lot of movement in the market, e.g. by Frontiers and MDPI, which entered the market quite recently. But and we also have not pure open access, but open access mixed with easy administrative processing. So one should not relate it fully to open access, these results. But the deal contracts with these two big publishers make the journal portfolios of these large publishers more attractive, and this could, a big spur further concentration. So yeah, as a wrap up, we did the first large-scale investigation of changes in publication behavior due to the deal contracts in Germany with causal identification via this difference in difference approach, and the probability to publish in a deal journal increases by 3.6% as we measure it. And this might lead to further concentration in the publishing market and might also maybe foster the attractiveness of hybrid journals compared to full open access journals, because hybrid journals are older and have this bonus of higher reputation. So it's easier or more interesting for researchers to submit to a hybrid journal with a grown reputation. That's it from my side. I hope I haven't spoken too long. And yeah, if you want to read our paper in detail, it's forthcoming in Managerial and Decision Economics. It's now available online early under this domain. You can also Google it or find it Google Scholar. And it's also open access because it's, as we are German researchers, covered by the German deal, and it's the Wiley publication. Yeah. So thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your comments and questions.
Thanks very much, Benedikt. I'd like to hold all the questions until the end so we can get some good discussion going. So please do post them to the Q&A box, not the chat box, and we'll pick them up as soon as we're concluded here. I'd also like to include the other panelists to prepare reactions to the others if you've got them. So Wilhelm, we're going to hand it over to you now, please. You're muted.
So no, I'm not muted. Thank you for inviting me. And I would like to say I hope not the future is the hybrid future, but I'm afraid, although, will there be any transformation, or are we stuck with the transformative agreements? So in Sweden, we had a research bill last year, and they said that everything should be direct open access from 2021. So it's a short time to get 100% open access, but we are working on it. And all the stakeholders in Sweden should work on it. So it's both the founders and all the universities. And the National Library got the assignment to work on this together with the founders and the universities. But Sweden was one of the early adopters of transformative agreements. So from 2014, we had our first, and then we have made more and more until 2021, when we have 19 transformative agreements and 2 pure open access agreements within the Gibson consortia. Then many university and university college have their own agreements, both with the pure open access publishers and with smaller societies. And with this, we reach about 75% of open access of corresponding authors from the Gibson consortium. And we still have some agreements to take. With pure open access publishers, you see, with MDPI, it's a growing market. It's more and more publications with MDPI, and we will have a Gibson agreement next year, and also with PLOS we are discussing an agreement, but still we have a bit more to reach 100%. So Sweden is one of the early adopters, as you can see. Netherlands is the country that have more transformative deals than we have, and fully open journals deals. But this comes both with problems, because when we are now discussing what will happen with the transformation, many other countries are starting to have the first deals. And in many countries, they haven't even discussed to go over to open access. So what do we think about the fully open publishing agreements then? Gibson strategies, we promote to negotiate more agreements with pure open access publishers. We think it's very important that we don't just have with the big publishers, commercial publishers and big publishers. As Benedikt said, it's a question that it could be monopolized with only the big publishers. So we try to have other agreements as well. At Stockholm University, we centrally finance all APCs in fully OA journals. So when we canceled with Elsevier, we said that we should use the money to promote the fully open access journals. And then when we got to deal with Elsevier, we continued to do this. A problem is that libraries with tight budgets have problems to fund pure open access deals, because usually the money doesn't come from the library. It is often the researchers that pay for themselves, for the funder that pay. So in Sweden, we have discussions with the funders how to fund pure open access deals. So we have one of the deals that the founders go in and take half of the deals. And I think sometimes it has been problems to negotiate with the pure open access publishers with consortia. They don't really want to negotiate. They have ready deals that they serve to us, and I think it's a need for negotiating. And also the pure open access publisher must discuss their business model to find a sustainable future. So in Sweden, we have started to discuss what will happen beyond the transformative agreements. As Plan S says that after 2024, they won't fund hybrid journals anymore. And we thought that this is a good time to think about our strategies. So we have an aim to work out a strategy for the consortia when negotiating new agreements after 2024. The strategy will be mandated from the management of the universities. The group will also investigate alternative publishing routes and give suggestions on such. And the time frame is from 2021 to 2023. And the membership of the committee is from university management. We have researchers from different disciplines. We have founders and we have negotiators from the consortium. And the work of this year, we have had 6 different workshops to understand and explore the market and how to come up to a sustainable strategy. And we started to discuss consensus and scope, as we all have different stakes in this problem. The researchers from different disciplines discuss in one way, and the founders and the negotiators in other ways. Then we had a workshop to look at alternative publishing routes, open platforms, and open infrastructure, and all thought that we need to do this as well. We can't just have the transformative agreements. Then we invited 3 different publishers to discuss with them about the future. We called it playing chess with the publishers, negotiating positions on an oligopoly market. And it was Elsevier as the biggest player here. It was Cambridge University Press as one press that are thinking of transition to full open access. And it was Frontiers, a pure open access publishers. And it was really interesting discussions between the group and the publishers. And we can't do this alone in Sweden. So we had something we called an international power collection, where we had exchange of experience from Germany, Norway, and from the Netherlands, where we discussed where the different countries are heading. And our last workshop this year will about harmonizing our policies. In Sweden, we have different policies at all of the university and different policies from the founders, and we don't have a national policy. And next year, we will start working on the strategy for the future. So will there be any transformation? I'm not sure, because very few publishers want to change their business models. When we negotiate with them, they want to have contracts long after 2024, and we don't see any change to leave the hybrid model or anything. Many publishers start new journals behind the paywall. I think even more journals behind the paywall than open access journals. Business models built on print and spent APC isn't sustainable for the future. We don't know what we are paying for. The ground for payment is on the print spend 20 years ago. And then in the meantime, the APC's prices are increasing and are increasing more than the inflation. And as I said, no transparency about what we are paying for. So I don't think that the APC model will be sustainable for the future, not within the transformative deals and not with the pure open access publishers. So I think it is needed to have an international discussion about the transformation and about sustainable business models for the future. And I have written a small editorial about this at UKSG News. So that was all from me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wilhelm. Sharla, do you want to take it from here, please?
Yes. Hello, it's an honor to spend time with all of you today. My name is Sharla, and as was stated earlier, I work at Lyrasis, a nonprofit membership organization of approximately 1,000 members and based in the US. My role at Lyrasis is to negotiate the best licensing terms and pricing of the products and services available to Lyrasis members, as well as seek out new programs that demonstrate transformative influence in the scholarly communication landscape. I was asked to speak today about the US perspective on open. Although I cannot speak for all US libraries, Lyrasis does act as a hub for a significant amount of open content programs available to libraries in the US and beyond, and I will be speaking from what we have been learning as we play this role. I often hear from non-US peers and colleagues complaints about libraries in the US being slow to participate in open, and asked particularly why so few US libraries and consortia are participating in transitional agreements focused on APC-based pay-to-publish models. Most of these models developed to support funding of the OA are inequitable. This is because they are built upon the assumption that only research institutions are interested or able or should be responsible for funding publishing. This assumption has delayed the US library community participation in these types of agreements, and I'll explain why. The US Department of Education lists that there are nearly 4,000 degree granting academic institutions in the US. However, only around 250 of those are research institutions, 131 being dubbed as specifically Research 1. So when considering that a bulk of publishing occurs at these 250 institutions, then these models are shifting the burden of cost to roughly 6% of the institutions in the US. And I guess that's fine if that 6% held most of the library funds in the US, which isn't the case. But as always, it isn't this simple. We tend to want to lump all research institutions into one bucket, but research universities in the US vary according to size, control, focus, selectivity, and the number of degree programs offered. And thus they have varying size, flexibility, and control of their library budgets, which means they have varying ability to participate in these types of agreements. Library funding in the US is highly decentralized. There is no access to nationwide funding to pay publishing costs. There is no nationwide consortium in the US. Although many of the research institutions belong to a variety of consortia, they do not all participate in the same journals groups, and many of those groups often consist of non-research or read institutions. A few libraries have access to centralized funds at their local institutions or as members of a well-resourced consortium or system that has built capacity for a centralized fund that can be utilized to pay publishing costs. If they also have enough staff to help negotiate and maintain APC-based pay-to-publish agreements, then this is where you will find institutions and consortia that have entered into these agreements. In most cases, though, these agreements and how they came about at these institutions or consortia are not replicable for others in the US. So when asking the US library community to participate in pay-to-publish funding models, it is no wonder that only a small portion of the entire US higher education community actually does so. Don't get me wrong, US libraries want to see agreements had, particularly with the large commercial publishers, to reduce in cost and increase in OA publishing of articles. So more libraries and consortia are learning how to navigate these agreements, but I do not see this trend accelerating, especially as the US library community is considering other ways to invest in open. So how are they actually participating in OA? In my role at Lyrasis, I am seeing libraries take a twofold strategy. They are attempting to balance cultural change and operational change that's needed at their institutions in order to make open a priority. Albeit not a new trend, there are more libraries that are reaching out across campus, taking opportunities to build community by educating faculty and students about open. They are convening multiple stakeholders to develop institution-wide open access policies. And they're starting to invest more in open research support services like their own publishing instances, or in communities like ORCID and DataCite to foster a stronger and healthier open culture on their campus. The shift toward open at US institutions accelerated during the pandemic, and we are now seeing a massive rethinking about the roles that scholars, libraries, consortia, and publishers can take to recalibrate the scholarly publishing landscape so that it is more aligned with shared values, such as sustainability, equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as access, accessibility, transparency, openness, and trust. Taking a values-based approach with anything means that you take some time out for introspection. Think about what really matters to you and your organization and adjust your actions accordingly. Many libraries and consortia have been doing this and releasing various principles and value statements to reshape collection development strategies and help with decision-making, particularly around disinvesting from large commercial publishers and using their savings to open up access to more content. Developing principles or criteria is not enough, though. You've also got to figure out a way to operationalize those criteria to make them actionable. Libraries want to be able to make smart decisions and support OA creators and publishers to ensure improved access to research, data, multimedia content, and provide financial support as closely as they can with those actual communities. Thus, there is an emerging interest in supporting publishing programs whose values align with their own. There are emerging infrastructures to help libraries operationalize their values, but there is this other side of the coin. They need to find more open access programs or publications that align with their values to actually invest in. So Lyrasis has stepped up to help the library community put their money where their mission is. Lyrasis is taking a multi-pronged approach and seeking out programs and publishers whose values align with ours and those in the library community. We respect the diversity of open models. We believe there is a need for many approaches to support the diversity of scholarship. When vetting programs, we focus on those that create opportunities for a diverse array of libraries and institutions to engage. We seek transformation through a variety of open models. As a result, we are building a connection infrastructure of funding communities around content published by smaller nonprofit publishers like university presses, library publishers, and OA native publishers. We are not just trying to meet the libraries where they are, but where they want to be. You may be asking, are the US libraries showing up to fund these programs? Ever more libraries around the world are now plunged into austerity. Many longstanding subscriptions have been canceled due to library budget pressures. Yet a careful analysis of libraries' funds spent through Lyrasis in the past 7 years provides evidence that these dollars have not completely disappeared. Rather, financial support is slowly but consistently transitioning from commercial paywalled publishing programs to OA and nonprofit ones, even during the pandemic. And a significant reason for this is because we have been growing an open portfolio that better aligns with the library's values. We all have a very unhealthy relationship with money. This is because we largely operate out of a predominant worldview of scarcity, that there isn't enough grant funding or big enough budgets for scholars, faculty, students, libraries, or publishers alike. This creates a culture of silos, greed, and unhealthy competition. This worldview is so pervasive that we tend to assume that it describes the world the way it is, rather than recognize it is a constructed lens that shapes our ideas and our actions. Our collective consciousness deems such entities as the big commercial publishers as too big to fail. We are mostly oblivious to these forces because we take them as normative and, in fact, absolutely necessary to sustain scholarly publishing. These blind spots can only be overcome by a diverse array of libraries and publishers, affirming, trusting, and supporting one another. I believe that one of the good things that has resulted from the pandemic is that we are now seeing many people, librarians, publishers, funders, authors, from all around the world coming together to form alternative systems for imagining a sustainable future. But it does require an attitude change, particularly around money. And I recently read a quote by Charles Eisenstein that reflects this. The money system is a game of musical chairs, a mad scramble in which some are necessarily left out. It is an outgrowth of our attitude of scarcity, but we can't just change our attitudes about money. We must change money too, which after all is the embodiment of our attitudes. So I'm trying to change money in my own little part of the world, which is in serving the library community. I have started to think and talk about money as energy. Even with small budgets, we can move that energy in very strategic and values-based ways. When thinking about transformation of scholarly publishing, where do we want that energy to flow? By adopting multiple strategies for transitioning to open science and funding scholarly content from a diverse publisher community, we have tremendous potential to shift how money flows and can potentially transform the mental model that governs how people think scholarly communication works. So what does this look like in real life? Well, we can't do everything, but we can do something. We must establish principles and values to remind us of what our roles are and how we want to navigate this space, and then develop mechanisms and tools for operationalizing these values, embedding them into our missions and putting them to action. Once your mission is established, invest in your mission first. If your mission is OA first, then this likely manifests in continuing to work with the large commercial publishers, and that makes sense as they are the largest providers of OA, but seek balance. Libraries are funneling so much money to these publishers and then telling those smaller publishers whose mission aligns with their own that they don't have enough money to support them. No wonder not-for-profit entities in this space are struggling. By investing in open access publishing, especially with nonprofit mission-driven publishers, you are reinvesting library funds in infrastructure that supports and shapes sustainable mission-aligned publishing of scholarly content that will be accessible and used, but it requires all of us to do this. And hey, by investing in sustaining OA pure and OA native publishers, aren't we investing in the future that we are seeking? Aren't these publishers the model for what we want others to look like when the transition is complete? Consider creating a budget line specifically for investing in new OA programs. Commit to diversifying and balancing your investments. Look for opportunities to invest in publishers that align with your mission. And if you're not sure what those are, look for keywords like academic-led, scholar-led, Diamond OA, collective collaborative funding, membership, subscribe to open, native pure OA. Scholarly publishing is complex. It is riddled with legacy politics governed by outdated systems, permeated by a culture of scarcity, competition, and inequity. But if we believe in a world in which a diverse array of scholarship is equitably available to all who wish to access it, and if we believe that the current stakeholders, the likes of libraries, publishers, funders, and scholars are the ones who can deliver on that vision, then it is our collective responsibility to seek out, connect, empower, and sustain those who are committed to leading in a way that will more likely bring that vision to life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sharla. Thank you, all of our speakers today. And kudos to my colleagues who've organized today's webinar. You've each left us with a set of really thought-provoking remarks. Thank you. So let's take a look at the chat and see what comments we have from our participants today. And we have got a nice, rich set of questions here. So for any questions that we're not able to get to today, Bernie will send them to our speakers so that they can respond to them in writing after the event. So I'm just gonna start at the top. So Wilhelm, looks like we've got a question in the Q&A for you at the top. So I'm just gonna read it for the benefit of the audience. So from Stefan Kuster, a question about the sustainability issue. He understands the view that transformative agreements and hybrid OA are not sustainable financially, but why do you consider APCs not sustainable? Average APCs at fully open access publishers are usually below the per article cost in transformative agreements and hybrid titles, so wouldn't fully OA agreements using models that avoid individual invoices to authors help address the issue?
Well, I'm not sure if we are base all the agreements on APCs. We can't budget for that within a year. You never know how many articles that will be published with an author from Sweden in that year. Then I think we should come up with something else that we can discuss. Maybe it can be based on the article, but not based on the APC when you had a contract between a publisher and a consortium. But I think we need to discuss this. But as we see it now, we have had big problems with transformative agreements, whether it had walls where you, if you reach the wall, then you can't publish in open access anymore. And that has been based on the APCs, and that's not good. And I think it could be the same with if we had agreements with pure open access publishers as well. So I think we need to discuss with each other, how could we find it sustainable for both the universities and for the publishers?
Thank you. A question for Benedikt. Are these effects deal specific? The effects you described in your presentation, are they deal specific or a feature of conversion to OA generally, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's something in the middle. So we look directly at the deal and that point of time, like the implementation of the deal contract. So I think these effect is deal specific, but most of the deal is a transfer to open access publications. So I think this is of course also related to the deal, to the open access effect. So I guess a big part of it is the open access effect, but there's also this issue of deal that your institution covers the costs and full organization of the payment for hybrid journals, and this is therefore I think it's not solely full open access. And I also want to re-emphasize this hybrid issue, that it's not the same if you set up a new open access journal or if you publish in a hybrid journal, which already exists for a long time, an article now open access. So there's lots of open access influence in this effect, I think, but it's not 100% of this. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you. Follow-up questions are very welcome. Lisa Hinchcliffe getting bumped right up to the top of the list. So Lisa's asking, what kind of pure publish agreements are the presenters seeing interest in, or which would you like to pursue? So Sharla, could you take this one first? So what type of pure publish agreements are you hearing about from your members, or which are you interested in? And in part, the question is, what does pure publish mean for you?
Well, I'll answer that last part first, because I think it's important to have a shared language here. For me, it's about those who are OA native. And so it's not so much just about pure publish agreements, but actually having a partnership with a publisher that is pure OA, that is their publishing. And at Lyrasis, most of our relationships in that vein, as far as how that's defined, are actually with book publishers. And so looking at the OA native book publishers, like Punctum Books, or you're looking at open book publishers, you're looking at those who have always been open. On the journal side, we also support Diamond OA journals that are published, in some cases have always been open, and are published through library publishers or university presses. And those are where I'm pretty excited about and trying to find ways to sustain those, because I feel like those are at some of the highest risk. But I'm also very interested in, we're in conversations with PLOS. PLOS has some really interesting models that, although they are APC based to a certain extent, they're trying to find ways to transition outside of that that kind of paradigm and way of looking at how the distribution of costs should be administered, and so we're having conversations with them, and I find them also very interesting.
Thanks, Sharla. Wilhelm, could you take the same question also?
Yes, I think the most important is where are our researchers publishing? So we are looking at different pure open access publishers and see where Stockholm University is publishing. And if we get many articles with one publisher, we make a deal. Otherwise, we pay for the APC for the researchers. So just follow the researchers. Then I think Diamond is interesting to work with. And I think that is a part of the ways we can go. But the most important is to follow the researchers where they want to publish.
Thank you. And Benedikt, am I right that you're not monitoring the types of pure publish agreements at the moment? Not yet, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So I think the other ones can say a lot more about this on this question, but I think the core important point from a competition economist's view is always to avoid market power. So the agreements now and the present and in the future should throw an eye on this issue to avoid that, I don't know, the strong ones get even stronger and can gain more market power because of this. Once you have market power, you can always extract some extra rents at the cost of someone else. And so I think we need a lot of competition. How this is like shaped in types of an agreement, I think this I can only leave to the experts.
So thank you. So I wanted to follow up on that with you. So you'd warned us against, monopolization and concentration in different lanes here. Is the way to limit monopoly? Is it to promote competition?
I'd say surely yes. So I mean, of course, monopoly is always like the end point. I don't say that we directly jump to a monopoly, but this kind of oligopolizing and monopolizing tendencies are there in this platform system, and we can, I guess, see this. And so I don't think there will be a monopoly in the end, but we have to prevent too much market power of just a few actors here.
Thank you. Benedikt, so I'm going to keep you on the spot, if I may. So question for Bernhard Mittermeier. So you investigated two publishers with the characteristics. The first characteristic being they had a deal contract, which includes OA publishing, and the second characteristic, they were a large publisher. These characteristics are independent. So from the observed increase in share, you draw conclusions to both characteristics. Can you say a little bit more about that, justify that?
Yes, sure. So, of course, we see this positive effect of the deal on this publication behavior. And I think that this is more general and not related to large publishers. So in that sense, that's true. That's on the first side, unrelated. The second part, or the connection to the large publishers, comes in with this two-sided marketness, this platform structure of academic journals. So as we have two large publishers that benefit now from these deal conditions and this easy and large scale open access, and I think this effect is mostly driven by open access, then their journals might get over proportionally more attractive, which again draws more publications from other publishers. Or potentially from other publishers, and this fosters this market concentration process, I think. So in the second step, it's not that we say that only, I think also small publishers can benefit from these conditions and from the deal conditions if they get the same. But I think this concentration process is a problem. I hope this explains this relationship. we draw, or this conclusion we draw. But of course, I also want to say, like, emphasize we have early evidence, and this is what we do is like some kind of prediction or what we would expect or what we fear, but this is not completely so. That's not the complete truth, of course. We would expect this, and I think we have a lot of arguments which are in favor of this hypothesis, but it's still a hypothesis and subject to be proven by reality.
Thank you. Lots and lots of still for you. I'm just going to shift to Sharla for a moment. Sharla, are you able to say the average size of library spending on APCs within the Lyrasis consortium?
No, and that's because, we have a lot of members, for one, and they are all in varying different agreements if they do enter into any kind of transformative agreement. And so, of course, it would be based on each individual publisher and so, no, Lyrasis itself and the groups that we manage, we do not have any transformative agreements in place at the request of those members. And it's because in most of those groups, only a small percentage are actually research publishing institutions, whereas most of them are in that read, kind of category where they don't have a lot of, maybe 10% of their faculty could be publishing. And so trying to balance the cost distribution or rebalance it based on actual publishing costs, it's not making sense yet. And we haven't, been able to come to any conclusion of where transformative agreement would actually work with those groups. So no, I don't have that answer for the Lyrasis consortium.
Thank you. I'm going to keep you on the spot, if I may, and ask if you personally see a role of the US federal government in supporting pure OA publishing.
I saw that, and I was to get our federal government in the U.S. to do anything together. It's a challenge, especially these days. I would love to see more support from the federal government and in just publishing in general. And we're seeing that in some ways, but it's around like open educational resources more so than the the scholarship that's published, in STEM or even humanities and social sciences. It's around the whole textbook problem, right? That we're seeing also in UK and all of Europe, but there are state funds that are being used to help publish open educational resources, and so a lot of energy has been going that way. And in particular, some states, because there is actual, centralized funds that are assigned to that are not coming out of library budgets to support it. So that's start. We're in baby steps, and I do know that there are certain advocacy organizations like Spark who are trying to have conversations at that national level, and we'll see if anything changes. But we don't have the kind of coordination like what you see in the EU across the US. I would love to see some more support in that, but I don't see it in the next even 3 to 5 years. It'd be great if it had happened, though.
Thanks, Sharla. Wilhelm, over to you. There's a question around the role of the National Library of Sweden. So I wonder if you could just say a little bit about that in this context, and then follow up and say if you've looked at the subscribe to open model in your discussions at all.
Well, the National Library in Sweden hosts the Gibson consortia. So they are the administrators of the consortia, but the consortia is steered from the universities. So we have university management and librarians and university administration in the steering committee. And the government gave assignments in open science to both the National Library and to the Research Council in Sweden. So the Research Council should handle open access to data, and the National Library open access to scholarly communication. So they should help us working with this, the National Library, and they have different groups working on this together, and then they should follow up and monitor what's happening within open access, and then get help the universities to steer. But I think most of the work is done from the universities, of course. And we don't have the money in the library budgets at the universities. So we have discussed this within the rectors conference. So this much must be a matter for the whole university, not only the libraries. So now we have a discussion in the rectors conference at each meeting about scholarly communication. That's why we have this group. It's elected from the rectors conference. And the last question was about Subscribe to Open. Yes, of course, we work with Subscribe to Open as well. We have it with different publishers and even at journal levels. But we don't have it within the consortia. We do it at the university level.
Great. Thanks very much. All right, Wolfgang, Benedikt, going back to you. So we'll ask you to talk about your code and data out loud, if that's all right. And then a question from John Edwards with respect to whether you have modeled likely onward effects on publication behavior across these agreements, specifically whether these trends are likely to be sustained to 2022 and beyond. And that's John from Cambridge University Press.
Yes, so regarding the data, we've used data on publications from the Scopus database, which is run by Elsevier. We cannot, this is copyright protected. We have not uploaded our code because it's directly related to Scopus data, but you can come back to me. I guess Eric has asked this, and we can talk about how we did this, and you can get the part of the code which is not confidential. And I can share this, that you can do the same analysis. This is no problem. If you just send me an email and reach out, we can talk about this, definitely. But also, like, if you have in Scopus access, you can get the data on your own with Scopus license. Yeah. That's to the data. And the second question is whether this is going to be onward. So again, yes, it's an hypothesis, and we do not know this for sure. So basically, it could be the fact that this is some kind of early excitement and this disappears over time, so the effect diminishes again. But I think it's more likely, and what theory would tell us is that this effect is going to be going to continue. I think this would be more likely. It will change, of course, if there are many additional large-scale open access contracts when this competition advantage of the deal diminishes, because lots of publishers get the same. The researchers are aware of this as second step. Then, this might diminish, but I think it's going to continue. This is my prediction, but again, it's an hypothesis.
And do you have plans to revisit your analysis in a few years' time?
Yes, definitely. We are totally open to redo this and look what we can see from a much longer time series. And I think it would be quite interesting to redo this and to adjust it maybe to other large-scale contracts. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, me too. I hope everyone's enjoying the conversation as much as I am. I feel like we're traversing a lot of territory and perspectives here, and it's broadly related, but also, we could imagine doing deep dives into a lot of different things here. So Charlotte, coming back to you, I was wondering if you could say a little bit about if there's any tension or what it's like for the library to try and balance the values that you describe should kind of govern their decisions and purchase behaviors with the pressures of demand from campus that have really been a driver of behaviors to date. Could you tell us a little bit about that conversation if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing a little bit of feedback on that, where there are essentially two types of personas of OA investors that have emerged in the programs that we have provided. There are those who are invested in almost act like angel investors of sorts, where that they just want to see these new OA models to be successful. And so sometimes they're giving more money than even what is recommended for their size of institution, because they are committed to trying to transition scholarly communication, not just make OA content, but to actually change how we we do all of this work. And so there's that kind of persona. Those are usually coming out of maybe scholarly communication budgets. However, I am seeing them come out of acquisitions budgets, and particularly those who have maybe unbundled one of their big commercial deals and they have extra money all of a sudden, and they're using that instead to invest in new ways of funding scholarship. The other persona is your traditional librarian who is going through and going through their checklists, their collection development policies, evaluating the content based on local needs. And that's where, you know, they say for certain programs that are coming through, they're like, it's a no-brainer. This is a value at our campus. And so like what Wilhelm was saying, you know, you're following what your scholars, where they're publishing or what they're using for teaching purposes in the classroom. That is where they are, you know, they're positioning themselves in how they're making those decisions. And it is making an impact on campus, with the idea that, you know, some scholars on campus are saying, hey, this is great. This is a program that we participate in and our institution is now funding it. But we're seeing, you know, this is all very small. This is not at the scale of what you see with transformational agreements with the big commercial publishers, where you're reaching a huge swath of authors. This is, you know, like you said, there are many wheels turning, many plates spinning here. And, you know, the transition needs to be happening at all these different scales with all these different publishers in order to maintain that diversity of scholarship that's out there. You have to have a diverse array of publishers for a diverse array of scholars to be able to turn to communicate their work, right? So that's where we're entering in, is on this other end, to try to bolster and sustain those. And it seems like, especially for those who have strong communication and strong connections to their faculty on campus, they are getting positive feedback from those actual scholars.
Thank you. So I think Bernie has just said in the chat, we're approaching our endpoint. We're stopping at 1/4 so that is another 9 minutes. So if participants want to give me a hand and vote up any questions in the Q&A, I'd be happy to take your feedback. In the meantime, Wilhelm, a question for you from Margaret Ellemans. I'll read it out loud for the benefit of everybody. So, could competition also play a role in the future of scholarly publishing and cost control? So what would it look like to phase out any agreements and let the decision maker, in this case the author, decide which journals offer them the most value for money? And then, so in this case, journals would compete for the best articles by offering high service for the lowest possible price. Does that make sense to you? And could you see that playing out?
Yes, that should be in a real market. That should be competition in that way. But in this market isn't a real market, because we are the researchers are dependent on the merit system. So they have to publish with the most high-ranked journals to get their promotions. And often different publishers own these journals. So it will never be a market as long as we have this merit system ongoing. But it would be nice to try to get a market within this. And I think Benedikt could look at that as well. If we could get a market, and then it should be competition between the publishers. But as it is today, it is not much competition.
Thank you. I'm the questions are jumping around here, so I'm trying to keep track of them. But Wilhelm, let's follow up on that same idea, although you may have just covered some of it. So from Jeroen Bozeman, so you talked earlier about following where our researchers are publishing, and you just said now that's kind of ideal scenario if the market works that way. But do you think that following the researcher could also have the danger of falling prisoner to past decisions that led us to where we are now?
Yes, it could be like that, but we are here for the researchers, to help the researchers to get published and get published in open access, of course. But that's why we have the discussion in Sweden beyond the transformative agreements. How can we steer the market? What can we do to reach sustainable full open access in the long while? And then we had to leave some old traditions, but I think it's really hard if we don't change the merit system in the same way. luckily, it's good discussions now in many countries in Europe about the merit system and how we could change it. The EU is also working on it, and naturally, but we have, of course, this needs to happen internationally to have the discussion around the world, because the researcher is moving around and should do that. So it is hard to predict what will happen, but we can be part of the change. And I think the researchers themselves holds that key to change this system, but they haven't done it as yet.
Thank you. Benedikt, coming back to you. Lots of support for this question around whether we might assess market structure effects like what you described in terms of financial data rather than number of articles.
Yes, I think it would be quite interesting to do this. One has, of course, to look at how much the firms disclose, because like for Elsevier, you get, I think, a lot because they are a stock listed company, or the mother company Rex is stock listed, but you have to check how much you can get on information, and naturally the publishers are not so, or firms are not so likely, if you want to do some research, which is not obviously in their interest to disclose data, but the financial dimension would be quite interesting, definitely. So when we get hands on these data, we definitely, I will directly jump into research once I have these data. Yeah, if I can get these data, yes, definitely.
You can get a lot of data in the ESAC registry, where we register our old transformative deeds. So you can get data not directly from the publishers, but from the libraries.
Yeah, thanks. I have a look at it. Yeah, I know the ESAC, but yeah, we'll have a closer look at that. Thanks, Wilhelm.
And Sharla, do you know if there was any movement around kind of getting away from non-disclosure agreements in the US so that libraries could talk a little bit more about their investments in publishing?
Oh yeah, that's actually part of a lot of the principles and value statements that are coming up, where they are, I think in particular the neural version of theirs, not NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements are kind of a deal breaker at this point. And I know that's happening also across the entire consortial community, talking through that, ICOLC, the International Coalition of Library Consortia, that has been a big problem for many years, for many consortia, not just individual institutions, but they are starting to put that on paper as far as what is part of checklists as to whether or not they would be willing to have an agreement with a publisher.
Great, thank you. Sharla, I'm going to have you take us out in just a minute. Okay. So we need to wrap up our call. So I'm going to come back to that last question from Rod Cookson in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to thank all of you for your remarks today. It's really been a fantastic and wide-ranging discussion. So again, kudos to my colleagues in pulling this together, and thank you for each of your contributions. So Benedikt, really great to get that agnostic economic perspective. It's an important reminder of the kind of system that we operate in, and where some of the sinkholes could be, where we don't want to end up. And Wilhelm, I really appreciate your frank discussion around the progress that we've had, and honesty around where we're headed. We think that we're headed in a transformative way, but are we really, based on our experience, our real experience in the years so far? So I really appreciate your reminders. And Sharla, I think that your presentation in large part spoke to where we'd like to be as a community. We're here in the service of research and teaching and academia. And so you've reminded us to take a step back and just say, why are we here, and how do we align our practice with our values? So the question from Rod Cookson is what mechanisms are there available to us to help deploy our values and equity considerations? So there's library purchasing decisions, yes, but maybe you could speak a bit more broadly to the frameworks that you mentioned earlier as well.
Right. So I'm putting in the chat the actual links to those that are in the slide, and of course slides will be shared later. But These are just examples of people who have taken time to figure out how to operationalize values. So what that means is you set up your values, and yes, everybody's going to have their own local values. They're all going to be different, and as they should be, right? We want to maintain diversity of thought and respect geographical differences and everything of how institutions organize themselves and what's of value to them. But then you need something to match too, right? And so, yes, I looked at Rod's question, and yes, publishers need to be setting these up as well. And aside from, usage stats and, how to measure value and return on investment and all of that, you need to also be listing what are your values, because libraries are starting to look. They're starting to wonder, what else should we be looking for here? Just like you look at investments, if you decide you want to, as an individual, invest in all companies out there that are green, right? Or you're focusing on UNSDG, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If those are your values, how then do you connect to those organizations that actually represent those values? So yes, I think publishers need to be putting these statements in writing as far as what they are, and look at what the libraries are looking for if you're wanting to get their investment dollars. And so those links that I shared are just examples of this. And what libraries are doing, they're listing their values, but then they're saying, well, how do we find this? If we're looking for diversity, what do we look for? Well, are we looking for diversity of editorial boards? Are we looking at diversity at a publisher? And what kind of mechanisms they have in hiring? I mean, they're starting to look deeply into this and taking it very seriously. And if you can find ways to help meet them in the middle by providing this information for them, then we can also develop a shared language, a shared understanding of words like sustainability. What does that even mean? We can start kind of working through these together, and I feel like move that needle even more so. And I ask the commercial publishers to do the same. Commercial publishers are not bad. You all do wonderful things as far as getting research out there that is needed to save the world with pandemic, the climate change and all of that. I'm just looking for more balance in the diversity of scholarship itself. And so by showing your principles, values, and making them clear to the library community, I think will help us have better, more trusted relationships.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. We had better wrap up, but we'll follow up with any unanswered questions by email. And once again, thank you so much to our presenters for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and thanks for a thought-provoking discussion.